Welcome. Let's talk about themes, baby. Let's talk about the Odyssey. I feel really good about that. Welcome to another lecture with me, Miss Crowell. Today, we are going to be talking about some of the themes that we have encountered in Homer's Odyssey. So, if you have your translation handy, then great. If you don't, go grab it because we're going to be reading a little bit. So I'm going to walk us through a few of the themes that appear, and we're going to look at how they're woven into the text and what their significance is in the lives of these characters and in the context of ancient Greece at the time. So without further ado, I'm going to take you over to my presentation, and we're going to begin. All right, so themes in the Odyssey as seen through ancient art. Now, I have put some works of ancient Greek art, and I've woven them into the presentation just as sort of a nice visual for some of the things we're going to talk about. If you have any questions about the art that I have presented to you, or you'd like to know where you can find more of it, or you want to know the citations, please just contact me. I'm happy to help you find more cool ancient art like that and tell you more about what I've presented here. It's quite a lot. So before we get started, I want to show you some cool artifacts that I found. This is an ostraka, or a potsherd, as we have learned about, with lines from Homer's Iliad. The lines written on this ostraka are the invocation to the muse lines, and they've been translated. It's not clear why they're written on this, maybe just as a little token, as a reminder of the lines. It's unclear, but it's very interesting, and we know that ostraka were used in Athens quite a bit for political purposes, actually. So, also, I have put in a papyrus fragment with lines from the Odyssey, just to give you an impression of what an archaeologist finds and what they have to work with when we initially begin translating an ancient text. Often it's fragmented, and the things we are able to recover sometimes look a lot like this, which is a very kind of decayed, ephemeral material. And unfortunately, it gets really difficult, but archaeologists and scholars have been clever enough to piece it together. It just takes a really long time. So that's a little taste of what an artifact might look like. Let's get into these themes. All right, so the Odyssey. We have walked all the way through. We have traversed the waves. We have been tossed into the sea. We have been washed ashore. And we have been sitting by the window waiting for Odysseus to come home. We have been there with all of these characters all the way through. And as we have traveled with them, we've observed some themes that keep popping up. So let's talk about a few of those. The first that I'm going to talk about is obvious, the theme of homecoming and journeying. Odyssey literally means a long, arduous journey. And obviously, homecoming is what Odysseus is seeking throughout the entire epic poem. Not only is Odysseus seeking homecoming, which is in a lot of ways the most basic human story that there is, the journey home. You know, it's the hero cycle that we've talked about repeatedly. It's the journey home, the call to adventure, the road of trials, and arriving back, crossing the threshold once again. Homecoming is a process. It's the end result of the journey. And Odysseus is seeking that, very human, very raw, very human. We can all identify with that desire to find home. Deception. Odysseus is nothing if not cunning and deceitful. And we see that appear throughout the poem. And we also see it come up in the actions of other characters, particularly Penelope. And we're going to break that down a little bit. Gender roles. You know, I got to talk about gender roles. What is Homer presenting from the eyes of the characters as the ideal man? And who is the dangerous man, the immoral man? Who is the ideal woman? Who is the dangerous woman? These ideas of what men and women were supposed to be, the roles they were supposed to play, and the qualities they should have to be that ideal man or woman were kind of fixed in ancient Greece. But the way Homer writes shows that he has actually a lot of awareness of these things as social constructs, and that maybe with some of his writing, he's playing with these gender roles a little bit and trying to give more power or more different perspective on maybe the dangerous man or the dangerous woman, or finding things about the ideal man or the ideal woman that are less than ideal. Divine intervention. The gods cannot keep their hands out of Odysseus's life. They cannot keep themselves out of all the mortals' business. They're all up in everything. And that means that they exert a lot of control over what's going to happen. So we're going to talk a little bit about the gods who are pushing for Odysseus and the gods that are pulling him back. There's a lot of that. And we saw it in the Iliad too, that fate is sort of out of the hands of mortals, but the gods are able to play with what happens and manipulate the situations that mortals find themselves in. The idea of fate versus self-determination. This piggybacks a little bit on divine intervention. Are the characters in control of their actions? Do they have agency over what happens next? Or is their fate already determined? And are they just kind of playthings for the gods as they follow the path that's already been assigned to them? We're going to talk a little bit about that and reflect on some of the actions that Odysseus and his men have taken that might reflect one or the other of these things. Maybe they have control over their fate, maybe they don't. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit more philosophical. Xenia. We love the Homeric qualities. Xenia, as we know, means hospitality. This is an ancient Greek traditional quality where hosts are obligated to provide welcome, lodging, gifts, and just shower with attention and comfort visitors to their kingdom, visitors to their home. It's a really welcoming kind of culture in which you come in contact with another tribe or another person, and you welcome them into your home, and you show them the quality of your character by being good to them and displaying Xenia, this hospitality. Endurance and suffering. Endurance is a big thing throughout this poem. These mortals are beaten and battered, and Odysseus is tired. Odysseus has been put through the ringer. But we find that he does not give up, and that's a quality that appears in a few other characters too. Even as he's losing his companions and friends all around him, and it seems like all of the forces are pushing back against him, he is pushing forward. He is trying to get home. We're going to talk about this one throughout, meritocracy in ancient Greece. And this ties into a couple other of these themes. It's the idea that character is everything. We know the term meritocracy from some more political and social contexts in history, where we know meritocracy is being measured by the quality of your actions and character rather than your birthright. And that's reflected a lot in the Odyssey, as it is reflected in the Iliad. The characters that are great or larger than life are made so because of their character. However, we do see some ways in which that is contradicted. Odysseus is a distant descendant of Zeus himself, according to the genealogy outlined in Fagles' translation. So is meritocracy fully intact? Some things really display that it's culturally valued, but some people do have an advantage over other people. So keep that meritocracy, character is everything, in mind as we go through. A good example of meritocracy, I think, would be the characters of Odysseus versus the characters of Agamemnon. Odysseus being sort of really respected by the gods because of the qualities that he brings to the table. He's able to help a lot throughout the Trojan War because of his cunning, because of his prose, his rhetoric. He is able to reach people. He is able to solve conflicts, devised the most cunning and conniving plan to construct the Trojan horse and infiltrate Troy. That was a brainchild of Odysseus. So Odysseus, though he is descended from a god, has, through his character, through his quality, through his actions, really earned the respect that he has gotten from these gods. Agamemnon is born with that power. He is known as the Lord of Men. However, does Homer's depiction of Agamemnon in the Iliad, we're calling back a little bit to our last text, does it convey that he is a man of great character? Does it convey that he is overly respected by the gods and the people around him? Not really. He tends to make bad decisions. He tends to err on the side of selfishness, and that's really reflected in the way the gods kind of ignore him, and the way he tends to mess things up a lot for the Greek army. Finally, last but not least, hubris. We know hubris from our studies of Greek theater. Hubris being arrogance and excessive pride. Odysseus is a man of hubris. Poor thing. He is nothing if not arrogant. And it definitely comes back to bite him a number of times throughout this poem. We're going to talk about a couple of those times. Let's go ahead and start us up. Deception and cunning. As we know, Odysseus is the man of twists and turns. He is nothing if not cunning, if not deceitful. We've seen him in the Iliad be able to exact these great plans that allow them to win the war. He is able to manipulate Polyphemus in order to escape and blind him. We see his cleverness appear throughout. He is always able to kind of skirt anyone who stands in his way. He's slippery. Odysseus is slippery. Further, he has this tendency to want to test and lie to and sort of toy with the people that he cares about. So that includes his companions, who he kind of sometimes withholds information from, and his even when he re-encounters and meets Penelope for the first time, he's like testing her. He's not saying, "Hey, it's me, I've been gone this whole time, so good to see you." He's like, "Let me do a little game real quick, just to make sure that she is as noble as I hope that she has been." He's always running some kind of scheme, Odysseus. He is not alone in this, however. I would like to highlight not only the cleverness and cunning and deceit of Odysseus, but the fact that Penelope is very much his match in terms of her cunningness and her cleverness. I'm going to read just a little bit that we have already encountered on page 96, lines 91 through 110. As the suitors are talking to Telemachus, as he's raging at them, "Get out of my house." Antinous says, "So high and mighty, Telemachus, such unbridled rage. Well now, fling your accusations at us. Think to pin the blame on us? You think again. It's your own dear mother, the matchless queen of cunning. Look here, for 3 years now, getting on to 4, she's played it fast and loose with our hearts, building each man's hopes, dangling promises, dropping hints to each, but all the while something else in mind. This was her latest masterpiece of guile. She set up a great loom in the royal halls, and she began to weave. The weaving fine spun, the yarns endless, and she would lead us on. 'Young man, my suitors, now that King Odysseus is no more, go slowly, keen as you are to marry me, until I can finish this web, so my weaving won't all fray and come to nothing. This is a shroud for old Laertes, for that day when deadly fate lays us out at last will take him. I dread the shame my countrywoman would heap upon me, yes, if a man of such wealth should lie in state without a shroud for cover. Penelope, you little snake. She knows exactly what she's doing. Poor Penelope is in a situation that is in a lot of ways as perilous and traumatizing as the one Odysseus is in, which seems crazy because Odysseus has been almost literally chewed up and spit out by monsters throughout this journey. But Penelope has been forced to just endure the advances of these men that she does not like, that she does not want to marry, that she does not want to have relations with, and hosts them in her house and sort of just like entertain their advances and try to stall them for years to see if she can finally let Odysseus come home. Even though she, in a lot of ways, vocally says she's given up on him, she is holding out for Odysseus. And her cunning is displayed in this tapestry that she weaves and unweaves every night, weaves and unravels every night. She knows exactly what she's doing. And in a lot of ways, Penelope finds herself to be Odysseus's match. Even in their reunion, as Odysseus tries to test her, she answers him with a test of her own, calling Eurycleia to bring out the great rooted bed, throwing Odysseus into a rage. He was concerned that she had chopped down their bed, which was actually a tree that was growing out of the ground in their bedroom. That proved to her that Odysseus was who he said he was. Penelope and Odysseus are two very clever, very cunning, and often very deceitful characters. Nobody in this epic poem seems to shoot straight with each other. You know, if I found my son after years and years, I probably wouldn't pretend to be a beggar for a long time before I told him the truth. I'd probably just tell him right away it's me. Same with Penelope, but Odysseus, that's not his style. As we know, Odysseus also displayed his cunning in his triumph over Poseidon's son, Polyphemus, which caused Poseidon to become enraged with him. And that begins Poseidon versus Odysseus 2K20. Penelope. Beautiful work. Very old signet ring, I think. Xenia. Man, is Odysseus lucky that Xenia is a thing. In Phaeacia, he encounters Nausicaa, and he is able to get help from the king and queen, her parents. And they not only agree to help him and provide him with ships, but they shower him with attention and create a game and feasting celebration for him. Odysseus is also looking for Xenia where he's probably not going to find it. As we know, he goes into the cave of the Cyclops Polyphemus and just starts eating his food and picking with his stuff and being like, hey, I'm a guest in his house. He's gonna love it that I'm getting all into his stuff and eating his cheese. He's gonna absolutely love it. Polyphemus gets there. He's not very socialized in the ways of culture in ancient Greece. He's kind of a savage, or anyway, he hasn't really grown up with any social constructs like that. So Xenia is not a thing for Polyphemus. Obviously, when he gets to his cave and sees Odysseus and his men just kind of chowing down on his food and messing with his stuff, he gets pretty mad. So in that way, Odysseus is sort of at a loss because he has expected to find Xenia where there is none. In that way, he has displayed his arrogance or hubris. So there's both sides of Xenia in this. That where it is present for Odysseus and helps propel him forward, and also where it is withheld from him. Telemachus also benefits a lot from Xenia in his interactions with Helen and Menelaus, as well as King Nestor. Telemachus is able to gain all of this information that he did not have about his father's fate. In that way, he's reaffirmed and also kind of empowered in his journey. As we know, there are two journeys taking place in this epic poem. There is the journey of Odysseus to return home to Ithaca, Troy to Ithaca, Odysseus, a physical, literal journey. And then there is Telemachus, who is on a journey of his own, but his is a more metaphorical journey. He's going and crossing the threshold from childhood into manhood. He's taking responsibility for his father's house, for his land, for his mother's fate, and he's finally trying to take action because he feels he is old enough to do so. So, both Odysseus and Telemachus' journeys are benefited by Xenia. Gender roles. Now, gender in the Odyssey and in the Iliad is a funny thing and a very interesting thing to talk about. So we have this idea of the ideal Greek woman. She is at the loom, she is loyal to her husband, she is quiet, she is pliable. And then we have the dangerous woman, someone like Calypso, a seductress, powerful, manipulative, equally cunning to a man, which is a threatening thing for men in ancient Greece. Any woman that has that shares and uses the intelligence they want to have as men is a dangerous woman. So Calypso, who holds Odysseus captive for years, she actually, when Hermes arrives to take Odysseus away, because Athena has finally succeeded in getting Zeus to enforce Odysseus's release from Calypso, Calypso, has this really great anti-patriarchy rant that she goes on. Hard-hearted you are, you gods, you unrivaled lords of jealousy, scandalized when goddesses sleep with mortals openly, even when one has made the man her husband. So when Dawn with her rose-red fingers took Orion, you gods in your everlasting ease were horrified, till chaste Artemis shot him to death with gentle shafts. And when Demeter the graceful one with lovely braids gave way to her passion and made love with Iason, bedding down in the furrow plowed 3 times, Zeus got wind of it soon enough, I'd say, and blasted the man to death with flashing bolts. So now, at last, you gods, you train your spite on me, for keeping a mortal man beside me, the man I saved, with one hurl of a white-hot, riding astride his keelboard, all alone, when Zeus, with one hurl of a white-hot bolt, had crushed his racing warship down the wine-dark sea. There, all the rest of his loyal shipmates died, but the wind drove him on, the current bore him here. That's page 156, lines 149 to 129 to 149. Okay, Calypso is fully aware that this is messed up, that the standards of what men and women can do are very unequal. Interesting thing, the work is in a lot of ways any work, any poem, any book is in a lot of ways a living and breathing thing, in that everything the author reflects is a kind of commentary, or it reveals some thought that the author has had about the social context that they're appearing in. This is what I mean by that. In writing Calypso's rant, her anti-patriarchy rant, Homer has shown that he is at least aware that these inequalities exist. In my view, reading an ancient Greek text written by ostensibly a man, that's pretty impressive. The fact that we get Calypso's voice at all says that Homer values that voice enough to put it in, enough to include it and give her a bunch of lines ranting about the patriarchy. So while Homer has kept the gender roles, the ideal woman, the ideal man, the dangerous woman, the dangerous man, in place, he also subverts them in a lot of ways by giving agency and voice to characters who might be considered more dangerous or more immoral or untrustworthy, such as Calypso. He also incorporates qualities of the dangerous women into the most ideal woman, the most idealized woman in the text. Penelope shares Odysseus's intelligence, shares his cunning, and is able to manipulate an entire huge herd of young men who want to marry her for a number of years. Those qualities of being able to manipulate men to that point, that would probably constitute the dangerous woman. In ancient Greece, women were not given citizenship. They were on the level of slaves. So any woman that is able to exert that kind of control over her surroundings, that's a big deal. Homer highlights that, and he gives Penelope that agency. I'm not saying Homer is a feminist. I'm just saying he clearly had a little bit of understanding about the inequalities taking place. The dangerous man. So the qualities of men that are valued in the Odyssey are also a little bit amorphous and hard to pin down. But what we know is from reading the Iliad is that the moral man, the ideal man, the strong man, the good man, if there's a war, he goes to war. We also, in the early parts of the book, get a story about how Agamemnon dies upon returning home. And he encounters his wife, who has taken another partner while he was absent, named Aegisthus. And Aegisthus helps her kill Agamemnon. And Aegisthus did not register for the war, or register. He did not participate in the war. He didn't go to war. That in itself is putting him down here, Agamemnon up here in the eyes of ancient Greece. It is the duty of men to fight. It is the duty of men to be the head of the household. We see that in Telemachus's journey into manhood, that he has to begin taking on the responsibilities of the ideal man. Odysseus, in contrast to Agamemnon, is not subjected to this fate. Odysseus, though, is also kind of shady sometimes, so he incorporates different qualities of both the ideal man and the dangerous man. Homecoming and journey. Now, as I said, two journeys are taking place throughout this epic poem. First, we have Odysseus. We know his literal journey from Troy to Ithaca takes 10 years. And he travels a winding road. He is the man of twists and turns, encounters a lot of obstacles, is thrown forwards and back. Meanwhile, Telemachus is on his own journey. He is trying to cross over from being a young man, a kid who can't really do anything to rid his home of the suitors that are just hovering around his mother like flies. He can't do anything, and that's no longer satisfactory for him. He's reached an age where he thinks, I have to start taking control. I need to find my father, or at the very least, figure out what I'm going to do next. And the first step he takes is to go find Nestor, as advised by Athena, disguised as Mentes. Telemachus seeks out this information and travels from place to place, looking for the tales of his father so that he can determine whether or not he'll make it home. And by the end of the epic poem, Telemachus has come so far as to slay the suitors alongside his father. He has come a long way to the point of defending his home at the side of his father, who he is the heir to. He's truly come into his own by the end of the poem. Ancient work depicting the slaughter of the suitors by Odysseus and Telemachus. As far as homecoming goes, Odysseus's return to Penelope, that's the moment we wait for throughout the entire book. And it is satisfactory, but it also is colored by Odysseus's tendency to want to run schemes and kind of toy with the people he cares about. As we know, he has some tricks up his sleeve, and Penelope also has tests to make sure he's who he says he is. But although their homecoming is marked by their tendency to manipulate and deceive, it's this is the final moment, really, that we wait for. Although the poem continues, we really waited for Odysseus to reunite with Penelope. Now, fate versus self-determination. These are the fates. We have I'm not going to go through the 3 fates because that'll be a rabbit hole, but it'll be fun for Miss Crowell, but we're not going to do it. But this is a work of the 3 fates. The example I'm going to use for fate and self-determination is the bag of wind. So when Odysseus receives the bag of wind, he does not tell his men what it is or what it is for. So they begin to assume that there's some kind of treasure that he's withholding from them. By withholding this information from them because of his cunning or deceit or because of his hubris, the men are overcome by their curiosity and they open the bag of wind. Now, were they fated to do that by the gods? Or did they make a conscious decision that changed the route of their journey and added years? That's a question for us to kind of mull over and consider. We see the gods manipulate the lives of mortals, and the mortals are just sort of thrown left and right throughout the epic poem, throughout Homer's works. But are their actions determining the next step, or has that already been predicted for them? There is kind of an air of self-determination in the writing of Homer, but the argument could definitely be made that their actions continually set them back in their journey, and that is what takes them so long, is that they keep rewriting their own fate by making mistakes. Hubris. Oh man, Odysseus. Oh, sorry, bud. You got so much hubris. Oh, bud, what are we gonna do? Now, hubris, God, he's dumb. So many examples of Odysseus displaying his hubris, as we already covered, expecting Xenia from the Cyclops Polyphemus, which results in just complete disaster until Odysseus finally manages to blind him and flee. And then the Odysseus and his men killing the cattle of Helios, they had one job, and that one job was, don't kill Helios's cattle. Helios being the sun god, the Titan, one of the powerful Titans who's been there from the beginning of time. They slay a cattle anyway because they're hungry, and that sets them back about 10 years. They spend a year just sort of chilling with Circe because Odysseus is like, yeah, we're having a good time. That sets them back. It's always something that Odysseus is prideful, so prideful that he continually puts himself in situations that set his journey back, that bring him further away from his ultimate goal, which is to return home. Now, let me see if I can find my... Yeah, anyway. Now, finally, our last theme, divine intervention. And we know that Pallas Athena has been Team Odysseus the whole time. She is there for him. She's got his back. She's always trying to push his journey forward. Meanwhile, Poseidon is trying to make sure Odysseus never gets home and that he dies violently, because Poseidon really hates Odysseus. Why does he hate Odysseus? Odysseus blinded his son, Polyphemus, and is just kind of altogether disrespectful all the time. So Odysseus has made both allies and enemies among the gods. So there's the push and pull of Poseidon versus Athena in the background of this whole epic poem. As Athena pushes Odysseus forward a few steps, Poseidon yanks him back. So I'm going to read a part from, now let me see, on page 296 of Fagles' translation, lines 340 through 354. Athena finally reveals herself to Odysseus because he is so self-absorbed and just kind of clueless. He has not realized that it's been Athena helping him this whole time. Athena's even gone so far as to help Telemachus, appearing to him in the form of Mentes, the mentor. But at this point, she finally talks to Odysseus in her true form. She says to him, "Aha, but you never recognized me, did you? Pallas Athena, daughter of Zeus, who always stands beside you, shields you in every exploit. Thanks to me, the Phaeacians all embraced you warmly. And now I am here once more, to weave a scheme with you, and to hide the treasure trove of Phaeacia's nobles lavished on you then. I willed it, planned it so, when you sent for home, and to tell all the trials you must suffer in your palace. Endure them all. You must. You have no choice. And to no one, no man, no woman, not a soul, reveal that you are the wanderer home at last. No, in silence you must bear a world of pain, subject yourself to the cruel abuse of men." She finally comes to him, and her message is one of a theme that we have already talked about, endurance. What Athena tells to him is, I'm helping you. I've been helping you. It's because of me that you're successful and that you have this treasure and that you're heading home and that you're making progress. Keep going. That is her message to Odysseus, and that is a big message of the Odyssey. It is arduous, it is long, it is a road of suffering. Much like the hero's cycle, we see Odysseus in a prolonged and protracted road of trials, where he is losing his companions left and right, mourning for them, mourning for his family, missing his wife, missing his home, feeling lost, feeling adrift, suffering throughout these 10 years. But he has to endure. To get to his goal, he must keep going. And I think that especially, I'm going to bring it to the real world for a second and talk about the times that we are in, the times of the pandemic, COVID-19. Endurance is I would say, maybe a prominent theme of every human life. We all put through things, and they take tolls on us, and in some cases they might stop us in our tracks or prevent us from moving forward. When that happens, we have no choice but to find a way around, turn around and go back, but in some way keep moving. Always keep moving, keep going. Even when it feels like you are stuck in place, keep going. Wake up, have a day, make it through, do your best, go to bed, try again the next day. Endurance is the reality of the human experience. And I think that we're all maybe suffering with a little bit of struggle with endurance right now. So something to think about as we reflect on Odysseus's long and very difficult journey. That is what I have for themes. If you have any questions or you'd like any further information about the art that has been shared with you in this PowerPoint, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to provide links, examples, and more art for you. I have enjoyed talking to you. I hope you've gotten a little bit from it. This is meant to be some background for our creative project coming up. So think about these themes and incorporate them into your work as you complete that project over the course of the next week or so. That's been me, Miss Crowell, on the Odyssey themes. Thank you guys, and stay safe.